entire chunk of mountain into the lap of the Laguna Beach Festival of Arts, virtually demolishing its restaurant and wedding chapel, Tivoli Terrace. This dramatic shift of earth, coupled with other slides on the coast and in the hills, made it clear that El Nino brought with him real change to the everyday, with real consequences, outside the sphere of any preparation. And Laguna Beach, for a time, began to fall apart.
That sounded like a freight train rolled over some homes in Laguna Beach. Some residents got out just in time, but they say they could hear it coming. It happened on Laguna Canyon Road near Castle Rock Road.
On February 23rd, a major storm began pelting the already soaked hills and overflowing channels of Laguna. With nowhere else to go, the water flooded out into the streets for the 97-98 winter's second time, covering the city's downtown with mud and debris. Though the downtown area was again badly hit, locked away behind the fallen hills deep in Laguna Canyon were more pressing horrors, some of which could never be cleaned up.
Somebody called me and said that they found a guy that had been missing. They found him dead out there where the slides were out around Castle Rock Road.
The lights went out. We were immediately engulfed in mud. I mean, it was really an avalanche. It wasn't a mud flow in the sense of being gradual. It was instantaneous. I mean, it came through the side of the house, broke down the exterior walls, the ceiling, the interior walls, and washed us all out 200 feet into the canyon. When it first hits you and you're inundated, your first thought is, you know, I can't believe this is happening. And I can't believe I'm going to die like this, because it was awful.
Glenn Fluke was among those caught in Ann's living room when the mudslide hit. At 26 years old, Glenn had spent the evening rescuing neighbors from their mud-filled homes, even after his own had been destroyed. Having been taken in by Ann and her family, Glenn tragically had only a short time to recover before being swept to his death.
And Glenn was great. He was sitting there and he was chattering. His teeth were chattering. He was so cold, and he never complained. A few minutes later, we all fell through the floor, and Glenn kind of got pushed to the left a little bit and ended up buried in debris underneath the trailer. I just met him very briefly that night, but from what I understand, a very kind, compassionate pussycat of a large man. Loved life, very gentle, and very caring. And he went from car top to car top to car top, and then up on top of rooftops to help a mother and her 3 young children and hand them down in a chain to get them to safety.
Around the corner from where Glenn Fluke's life had been taken was still another death. Nick Flores was found curled up in bed, buried beneath 6 feet of mud.
They said he was asleep under the covers, never knew what hit him. They finally found him about 2 o'clock on the 3rd day. We were hoping he was in this front part of the house, because that was just filled with debris and not mud, and if he was in there we could have gotten him out, but there was no way. The slide sort of sounds like when you fluff pillows really loudly. With the mud, it just sort of fluffs. It's this weird sound, almost like a silent loud.
The noise was just horrendous, the screams and the yells and the roar of the canyon still coming in the mud and the water. When I eventually landed pressed up against a building on Laguna Canyon Road, a tremendous amount of debris, of course, came over me, but when it was over, my head was still above the mud. Now, I did have a 2x4. It had been pressed very strongly against my throat, and at first I thought, okay, this is how I'm going to die. And I'm making peace with myself. I'm making peace with God. You know, I'm thinking about my kids. I'm thinking about the community. You know, my life did not flash before me. No bright lights, none of that. But when it was over, you know, I was really kind of preparing myself to die, and I was in a feeling of acceptance. And frankly, that lasted about a minute or two. And after that was over, it was like, forget acceptance, I'm out of here.
Recovering from her injuries, Ann, along with other wounded and displaced neighbors, was now faced with returning to the canyon, to heal not only her body, but also her home.
Thank God we're a community that is not afraid to get our hands dirty. And it's funny because it seems to be mostly the women in the neighborhood. We get out there. We get out there and we muck it up. I mean, we'll fill sandbags and lug them around and, you know, go and dig through and mop and shovel mud and dirt or whatever it takes. We'll do it, you know. Damned if we won't. We'll do it.
We're used to taking care of ourselves. They're very strong, kind, compassionate people. And they really band together in a crisis.
But mingled with the canyon's self-reliant strength is also the faint suspicion that things were a bit more harsh than they needed to be.
There were fire companies stationed at El Toro Road. They did not come into the Big Bend area after the first slides.
The first time we had an emergency response, they were there within a matter of a couple minutes. There has been some criticism that they weren't able to get people out of some of the houses, and I think that's probably true. I think they were simply unable to get to some people, and we didn't have any equipment that could do that, but they were there, and they were the best trained people we had.
A man died that should not have died, you know, and that's really sad. He should not have been in my house at midnight after having gone through what he had gone through. I do think that there was enough equipment in Orange County to have evacuated these people. Now, Laguna couldn't do it. I mean, granted, they had every fire truck, and the people that came and showed up and worked, they put their lives at risk. They did everything they could. But something's not quite right with the end of the story. And there are lessons that must be learned.
And what about El Nino, the child who pushed all this rain and mud and destruction in from over the sea? Well, he made a lot more messes on his way toward leaving, and his presence remains evident even now. The $550 million damage done to the state of California is still rising, but hardly compares to the tragedy of the lives snuffed out. As prepared as people can possibly be, it seems they can never be prepared enough for what an indifferent part of nature might bring. But whether you're an Ann or a Jessica, a corporal or a surfer, or even running a city, fortunately most of us do a pretty good job looking out for one another, which is nice to know, especially if you or I happen to be the one standing face to face with the child the next time he decides to swing through town.